Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. A few months back, I said 2026 would be a really interesting year for the show because we start to have 60th anniversaries of psychedelic rock records converging with the 50th anniversaries of punk records. This album isn't celebrating its anniversary for another few months, but given the arc we are on with last week's Eno episode and next week's Big Boy anniversary, now is as good a time as ever to feature this record. This week's album is Television, Marquee Moon. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what next week's album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls. You can find all of that on my channel, and if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website. Linked in the description. It's the place where it goes. Also in the description this week is my first book review for Tracking Angle. I reviewed Harvey Kubernick's latest. It's called Screen Gems. Kinda wild that I'm reviewing his book when I have cited his text several times in past episodes. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy of Marquee Moon, sorry, I know the glare is going to be a little wonky this episode. It's just what happens with these newer glossy sleeves. This is a repress from 2022 on Rhino Records, and as B-roll Abby will show you, it's on clear wax. I don't have many colored pieces in the grand scheme of my collection. I don't seek them out anymore. It's just how this run happened to come. Now, if you'll notice on the labels of the disc, those old school Elektra Records butterfly labels, the title track has a runtime of 9 minutes and 58 seconds. My copy actually has the full 10 minutes and 43 seconds. If you've had your copy of Marquee Moon since the late 70s or the 80s, congrats if you do, don't leave your windows open at night. Your Marquee Moon has a fade out around the 9 minute 55 second mark. This was done to preserve the sound quality of the record, since albums can hold 24-ish minutes of music per side at the absolute maximum. But CDs and more recent copies of the record have the full uninterrupted title track. I bought this copy at Armageddon Records in Providence, Rhode Island. I spent way too much money on albums that trip, but it was my 25th birthday. Now let's talk about this cover art with the same font as Frank Zappa's Hot Rats. The Marquee Moon cover photo was taken by Robert Mapplethorpe, iconic American photographer of the Horses cover, sometimes romantic, mostly platonic soulmate / muse of Patti Smith. You already know who he is. But Mapplethorpe doesn't take photos like this. This is not his visual style. This was a complete accident at the hands of television guitarist Richard Lloyd. Mapplethorpe gave Lloyd the contact print to show the guys so they could pick a shot they liked. As the story goes, some of the Xeroxes came out with wonky colors like this one. The guys actually preferred it to Mapplethorpe's photo. It reminded them of Warhol's screen prints, or the colors on a TV. This is the screen, and the border is the box. On the back, we have a print by Billy Lobo, and as B-roll Abby will be showing you, there is an insert with a rehearsal photo on one side and all the lyrics on the other. On Marquee Moon, we have the second lineup of Television, fronted by Tom Verlaine on vocals, guitar, and keys, with Richard Lloyd on guitar and backing vocals, Fred Smith, no not that one, this one, on bass, and Billy Ficca on drums. Marquee Moon was produced by Andy Johns with Tom Verlaine. Roll transition. get tired of saying this, AD? Yes, actually, yes I do, so say it with me, folks. This episode is gonna be a little weird. Television in their original iteration were together from 1973 to 1978. In that time, they only released 2 albums, the first of which, this one, Marquee Moon, didn't come out until 1977. I'm in a position where, in telling the story of Marquee Moon, I have to condense 5 years of a band's 6-year history into 1 chapter of 1 video, including 1 major lineup change and a lot of information about a guy who isn't even in the band at this point. Like, his presence in the band and eventual departure have a lot to do with why Marquee Moon sounds the way it does. Also, a lot of television's history is wrapped up in the early history of CBGBs. I will only be hitting the necessary points on this front. If you want a complete history of television that's also a really great history of CBGBs, I honestly like it better than some of the CBGBs focused books I've read, I recommend Brian Waterman's 33 1/3 installation on Marquee Moon. This is my pick for second best in the whole series. Nothing beats that Trout Mask replica volume, I'm sorry. About Marquee Moon, Waterman said, quote, "This album has, from its release, sent rock historians scrambling to situate it. Let's start by situating the axis of early television. Tom Miller and Richard Myers. They spun together this story that they were childhood friends who ran away from reform school together. Tom, the misunderstood prodigy, and Richard, the archetypal juvenile delinquent blowing up school buses and shit. In reality, while they did know each other from their school years, they showed up in New York a year and a half apart. Tom was a little psychonaut. He sang the praises of the Stones, the Doors, the Yardbirds, the, quote, primitive electric blues of Elmore James and Buddy Guy. He loved garage rock, and he loved the 13th floor elevators. Fire Engine was an early television set staple. So was the Count 5's psychotic reaction. I can't get your love, I can't get affection. Then you have Richard Myers, who loved the Stooges. He was anti-glitter, all rock and roll. Do you remember in the VU and Nico episode when I offhandedly mentioned Warhol's first attempt at an art rock band with Lamont Young? You're forgiven if you don't, it was totally a passing comment. Well, Patty Oldenburg was the singer in that group. After they broke up and she divorced her husband, she briefly dated Richard. Everything is connected, people! Now think of the state of New York City at this time. Kind of a hovel, right? The worst of the worst at this time was the Lower East Side. Persistent poverty, riddled with drugs and crime, and more abandoned buildings than not. Forgive me for getting all art historian on a motherfucker, but the Lower East Side in the 70s invokes Thomas Cole's The Course of Empire. While the rest of New York was around here, the destruction panel, the Lower East Side was here, the desolation panel. As Cole shows across The Course of Empire, when a society falls, laws, rules, social norms go out the fucking window, and their institutions, both physical and societal, crumble until they return to nature. This is perfect for young artists who don't give a fuck about the rules to begin with. Nasty as it was, Tom and Richard could not have picked a better place to be. The Lower East Side was the only part of the city kids like them could afford. In this environment of debauchery and decay, Tom, Richard, their bandmates, and their peers would invent something entirely new and different. We'd see this post-apocalyptic wasteland effect thing happen again with the short-lived but monumentally important no-wave scene. So what's going on in rock and roll right now? Excess on excess on excess. It is prog and stadium rock. The New York music scene right now, eons after the Velvet Underground and the Factory, it seems, is a combination of the cabaret revival, which in and of itself is inextricably connected to New York's queer community. See Lou Reed's Transformer and Berlin and, well, you know, cabaret. Jazz hands. I've never seen Cabaret. I don't know if they actually do jazz hands, but I feel like it's Fosse. Glitter, and the garage rock revival spurred by Lenny Kaye's Nuggets compilation. The New York Dolls existed at an intersection of all of this, but that is a story for another day. Tom and Richard struggled to break into this scene at first. They worked at various bookstores, including the Cinemabilia, to stay afloat. Their first band, the Neon Boys, fell apart when they couldn't find a decent rhythm guitarist. Television came to be at a complete Hail Mary audition at the Reno Sweeney Supper Club in October of 1973. Who happened to be there? Warhol associate and the guy's boss at the Cinemabilia, Terry Ork. He considered himself to be something of a Svengali. He offers to manage them, buy their gear, give them a rehearsal space. They bomb the audition, by the way. And he throws in this guitarist he met at the hottest club in town, Max's Kansas City, as a bonus. Richard Lloyd. Tom and Richard call up their old drummer Billy Ficca, and the original lineup of Television is born. About the band name, Richard Lloyd said, quote, "It's always there. It's so there that you lose your consciousness about it. Television just seemed to fit the bill, because it's something that's in every home in America. It's so obtrusive, it's unobtrusive." Even after solidifying a lineup and basically setting up Ork Records for Terry, Television had an extended personality crisis. Listening to what few early recordings we have circulating around the internet, it took them a solid minute to find their sound. They had their look down first. Thrift store clothes, ripped shirts, a DIY aesthetic filtered through the faintest whispers of the 1950s revival that would smack the American mainstream in the 80s. Malcolm McLaren saw this look, totally stole it from Richard, brought it to his boutiques in London. The rest is history. Television did it as a deliberate rejection of the glitter and excess that rock and roll had become. We were really unique. There was not another rock and roll band with short hair. There was not another rock and roll band with torn clothes. Everybody was still wearing glitter and women's clothes. To complete their anti-glam image, they decided to take stage names. We need something a little rougher around the edges, but still intellectual. We are young intellectuals. We run in the underground poetry circles. In the spring of 1974, Christopher Hampton staged Total Eclipse, a play about Arthur Rimbaud and Paul Verlaine. History will say they were roommates. Tom said to Nick Kent, "We just felt that we had to change our names in order to make a mark," though it was mostly done just for fun, now I recall. Richard had already chosen his name. Hell, as much for the sound as its implications. Tom Miller changes his name to Tom Verlaine, and Richard Meyer changes his name to Richard Hell, after Rimbaud's A Season in Hell. Verlaine and Hell were not lovers like Verlaine and Rimbaud were, but their matchy-matchy names lock them in as a pair. They are a package deal. You get one, you get the other. Surely this won't age like milk. During all of this, happening in the background of Television's formation, two major events happen that shape the Lower East Side art scene. In August of 1973, the Mercer Art Center's collapse. Literally. And Max's Kansas City closing for renovations in late 1974. This pushes their respective scenes into the arms of CBGBs. I can't do a Patty, so humor me. As the band played on, you could hear the whack of the pool cues hitting the balls, the Saluki barking, bottles clinking, and the sound of a scene emerging. Though no one knew it, the stars were aligning. The angels were calling. Yeah, in reality, it was drunk winos pissing outside and Hilly's dog shitting everywhere. If the Lower East Side was bad, the neighborhood that CBGB's was in was somehow even worse. Cab drivers refused to go there, so kids would have to either drive themselves and risk having their cars set on fire, or go on foot and risk getting mugged. CBGB's started as a country bar, if you can believe it. Owner Hilly Crystal was convinced it would be the next big thing. You've probably heard the story story of Tom and or Richard stumbling upon the bar just as Hilly happened to be hanging the awning and that's how they got the gig, or that they convinced Hilly to put on new music shows and that was like the birth of the scene. You've also probably heard the myth that Tom and Richard built the CBGB stage themselves. This is also false. It was in fact built by Eric Emerson and Cecil Coleman of the Tramps, the actual first band to play the club. You've also heard the myth of Richard Hell's Please Kill Me shirt. There's a whole book named after it, but he never wore it. He did make it, but he chickened out at the last minute and stuck Richard Lloyd in it. Aside from the winos that would show up at opening every morning, the CBGB's audience in the beginning was mostly other CBGB's bands. Lenny Kaye remembered, quote, "It was the same 25 or 35 people in the audience, and you would get up on stage and play, then go off stage and hang out and watch your friends play. Everybody had a sense of the destination, but the fact that this destination was so improbable allowed you to develop at your own speed." The grand reopening of the club in March of 1974 sets the stage for television's first extended residency. Clinton Halen said that television were the, quote, "first band to provide New York's post-Mercer's scene with focus." Who populates the CBGB's crowd? The Stilettos, fronted by an ex-Max's waitress, this laughably terrible band with matching haircuts who can't play any of their instruments. Surely they won't get far. And the poet laureate of punk, Patti Smith, was a freaking institution in the New York art scene at this point. She arrived in the city in the summer of love, 1967, smack between Richard's arrival in 66 and Tom's in 68. She obviously loved Rameau. She picked up what Tom was putting down. They promptly struck up a romance. More accurately, they struck up a love triangle between Tom, Patti, and Alan Lanier of Blue Oyster Cult. She wrote We Three about it. Tom wrote I'm Gonna Find You about her. This entanglement was mutually beneficial for both rock and Rameau loving parties. Patti hyped up television whenever she could, and still does to this day, writing glowing reviews for the various publications she contributed to. In return, Tom helped Patti get on the CBGB stage and cut her first single, Hey Joe. This little scene makes enough noise in the UK music press, you can thank Nick Kent for that, to draw the attention of Richard Williams, A&R guy at Island Records. Williams was brought to CBGB's to see Blondie, but he wasn't impressed, instead wanting television. He brings Brian Eno along, as if this guy wasn't busy enough in 1974 to produce their demos, but it's interesting to note that Richard Lloyd insists Eno didn't produce. Listening to these demos, the songs are down. Prove It changed very little from demo to album version.
First creep, then you leap up about it.
And Venus might have a better groove here.
It's so bright, and the world looks so thin.
But the session itself was a shit show. Apparently the engineer only knew how to record salsa music. And Tom was unhappy with how the demos sounded. Quote, "The guitars sounded like the Ventures, except not as good. The Ventures at least sounded warm and wet, and we sounded cold and dry. Very brittle, with no persona." He was absolutely set on producing television himself, despite having zero experience in a studio whatsoever. He turned the deal with Island Records down, and a deal with Eno's bestie Fripp's label, EG. And about here, we come to the falling out between Hell and Verlaine. To this day, you will find Richard Hell fans who say Verlaine was a snake, and you will find Verlaine fans who say Richard was a no-good junkie. It's like the Robbie Robertson fans versus Levon Helm fans, right? I have absolutely no interest in getting in the middle of your debate because both of you are right. And I feel Please Kill Me, as great a text as it is, stoke the flames. And I have no interest in a whole chapter about Dee Dee Ramone and Richard scoring drugs. To get to the root of why this division occurred, you have to understand the scene at the time. You still had a lot of lingering Warhol devotees, right? the superstars, the image. Richard Hell had a vision for television, no pun intended, with the ripped clothes and all. Punk is a performance. You're acting out delinquency and youth, even though there is a grain of genuine angst in there. Richard Hell is a character too, after all. So it wasn't about him rejecting an image. If Tom was in charge of the brunt force of songwriting, then Hell was in charge of the look. But Tom began to resent anything that distracted from the music. This was the clothes and Richard Hell's, Pete Townsend thing on stage. And there was this new song in the set, Marquee Moon, getting up to 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes long. Both of the guys loved the Stooges, but Tom didn't want to do Stooges-like songs. Richard appreciates the arty. He came from the underground poetry scene. But he doesn't want the arty sound. He wants gritty music to back it up. With this song, Marquee Moon, the guys split on where they want television to go. The friction, of course, friction, is what makes early television interesting. The set started out with a 70-30 split between Verlaine and Hell songs, with the guys singing lead 50-50. Over the course of their residencies in the fall of 1974, Hell's songs are slowly pulled from the set. As they book their first tour in the spring of 1975, the scene takes off. With Patti Smith and Television gone, both out on their respective tours, the CBGB's stage is quite literally wide open for the Ramones. Once these guys get their shit together, there is no stopping them. Oh my god, Bob Dylan reappears in New York amidst his messy separation with Sarah. He sees Patti at the bitter end and invites her on the Rolling Thunder Revue, but she turns him down to record Horses with John Cale. Another one of Brian Eno's besties. He's like the Eric Clapton of this period. I can't escape him. And in April of 1975, Richard Hell leaves television. He took all his television songs with him and started playing them with the Heartbreakers and his later group, the Voidoids. So what do television do now? They poach Fred Smith from Blondie, of course. Mind you, this is right after the Patti Smith group wooed Ivan Crawlaway, and the Heartbreakers very nearly stole Chris Stein. No wonder Debbie Harry has beef in Please Kill Me. These motherfuckers nearly scrapped her band for parts. Television come back from tour to the Unsigned Artists Festival. They cut debut single Little Johnny Jewel and almost lost Richard Lloyd for it. Torn Curtain debuted at Mother's, See No Evil and Guiding Light are in the set list by early 1976. They cut demos with Alan Lanier. The plot thickens. Sire offered a contract, Television said no. They offered too small of an advance. Atlantic were interested, but they said no. They just did not get Television at all. Clive Davis wanted them for Arista, but backed out for fear of competition with Patti Smith. And finally, in July of 1976, the nation's bicentennial, the same time as the Live at CBGB's record and going on 2 years after the Eno demos, Television accept a deal with Elektra Records, facilitated by who else? Danny Fields. Now, one of the big selling points for Elektra was that they said yes to Tom's original stipulation of producing their records himself. However, they had to have an engineer in the room who actually knew what he was doing. Tom wanted the Rolling Stones go-to, Andy Johns. He liked his work on Goat's Head Soup. But Andy wasn't exactly convinced. My first impression was that they couldn't play and couldn't sing, and the music was very bizarre. Tom liked Andy's guitar sound specifically, but this wasn't exactly communicated. When Television show up on day one, Tom finds mics on Billy's drums. What the hell are all these mics doing on Billy's drums? Since Andy had worked with Led Zeppelin, he assumed that Billy wanted to be mic'd like John Bonham. The guys say, hell no, we like how you record guitars, we don't want the drums to compete. He kept going, oh, it's a New York thing, like a Velvet's New York thing, you know, sort of like, oh, so you want to sound bad. Marquee Moon was recorded in 3 weeks, according to Waterman, 6, according to Lloyd, beginning in November of 1976 at A&R Records. The guys chose this place because it was where the Ramones recorded. The guys wanted Marquee Moon to more or less capture what they sounded like live. Lloyd said, quote, I think he, meaning Andy, was used to being involved with bands that were 3 sheets to the wind as part of their philosophy. We were really interested in the vision about sounding like us. I think that threw him. Plus, we picked this place that he was aghast at because the board had no EQ. They did make some compromises. Andy turned Tom and Lloyd onto overdubbing their guitars. The track listing of Marquee Moon goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have See No Evil, followed by Venus, then Friction, and side 1 closes with the title track, Marquee Moon. Opening up side 2, we have Elevation, followed by Guiding Light. Then Prove It, and the album closes with Marquee Moon was released in February of 1977 with promo singles, the title track, obviously a truncated version, and Prove It. Now, Tom turning down Eno back in 74 came back to bite television in the ass. By the time they had finally snagged a deal and Marquee Moon was out, they were up against a whole new beast. Never mind all the CBGB's kids who beat them to the punch. With a debut album in early 1977, television were up against disco. And the Eagles! This performed pretty well on the charts in the UK, cracking the top 40. It got them a gig opening for Peter Gabriel, but it floundered here, and that Gabriel gig unfortunately didn't go over so well. Think of what radio sounded like in early 1977, right?
So far gone on your own. Don't spill the most as the adolescent pumps his way into his hair.
Punk did not stand a chance. I was surprised that Rolling Stone reviewed Marquee Moon, but I'm telling you now, don't bother reading it. It's a nothing burger. Rolling Stone HQ moving to New York didn't give them any cred or know-how with New York bands, it seems. They were clueless. I'm even more surprised that this was Robert Christgau's album of the year. This is so not his deal. I pinned it as a Lester Bangs thing, but nope. Les thought Tom was a pompous ass. Tom thought Les was a drunken buffoon. Marquee Moon instead gained clout as one of those culty records, not unlike their source material, The Velvet Underground. This is one of the very few records from the 70s that has steadily moved up the rankings of Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list. Their revival began with their brief reunion in the 90s. David Fricke reviewed that LP. That was like a big deal for Rolling Stone in the 90s. Online music forums like Mew, Rate Your Music, and Reddit did a lot of legwork moving this album through the 2000s, and it's become a high-water mark for this amorphous thing called indie rock. Television were massively influential upon sonic youth. Lee Ranaldo and Thurston Moore play jazz masters like Tom, and perhaps television's most slavish devotees,
The Strokes!
If Alex Turner said he just wanted to be one of the Strokes, then Julian Casablancas just wanted to be Tom Verlaine. So, what do I think of Marquee Moon? Waterman said, quote, "Making sense of Verlaine's lyrics has always been a bit of a dangerous proposition. Their obscurity is a good part of television's mystique. If you first heard this thing on the internet and didn't have access to the lyric sheet, quote, you might have already formed phrases of your own to fill in where you couldn't make out what Verlaine was saying. His writing was intentionally open-ended, with lots of double entendres, sound-alikes, and puns. Lloyd described it as saying 5 words and meaning the 6th. And Tom, who was always shifty about what his songs were about and what lyrics meant, said each of his songs was like, quote, a little moment of discovery or releasing something or being in a certain time or place and having a certain understanding of something. Yeah, a head scratcher, I know. Let's break this quote down. Little moments of discovery. Youth. You become a person between the ages of 12 and 18, then you come into your own between 18 and 25. When your frontal lobe's done cooking, it's more changing than you'll do in any other time in your life. Releasing something, catharsis, or releasing pent-up energy. Youth is unsettled. Young people have a lot of energy and fewer places to transmute it as they grow up. Being in a certain time or place, the Lower East Side in the 1970s. A gritty, apocalyptic playground where anything goes. A tiny artistic haven. Having a certain understanding of something. I'll admit this still evades me, but there's the saying that teenagers know something that children don't and adults forget. Television are not punk in sound. Any and all of that evacuated when Richard Hell left. But for these reasons, ethos and feel above sound, television are somewhere in the punk rock family tree. Every great coming-of-age film opens with an I want. I want to study literature, but I'm the star quarterback of the high school football team. I want to leave my small town for the big city. I want to get the girl. I want. What does Tom want? He's not sure at first, but he knows what I want now. See No Evil is the energetic opener that Marquee Moon needs. This is their I Want song. All of their wants rolled up into a tight 3 minutes and change. Also tight are the interlocking and overdubbed Verlaine and Lloyd guitars, the core of the television sound, over one rhythm part. Like Phil Manzanera used oodles of guitar tones on Taking Tiger Mountain by Strategy, these guys used their full sonic library, from sparkly to stonesy grit. Tom asserts he knows everything, the way all young people do. It's interesting to note he was 26 at the time. Punk is a performance of adolescence, after all. He wants to fly a fountain. He wants to jump a mountain. He wants all of this, and he believes he can do it. I understand all destructive urges, he says. I get ideas. I get a notion. I love the way he says I get ideas. Even if he knows they won't work, he tries them anyway, like his boat made out of ocean. There's lots of anticipation. I see no. He leaves it at the last word, because he knows that's all he needs to do to land it. Under choruses of I see no and Tom milking the for all that it's worth, the guy and girl run off into the night together, chasing after whatever big things they want. I'm going crazy with the one I love. I keep on dancing with the one I love. But the 26-year-old maturity comes in. It's not just all about you. You control the feelings of the one you love. You can feed their fire. Above all, there's youthful optimism, the together we can conquer the world attitude. You pull down the future with the one you love. Venus was television's signature song, around since the Neon Boys days. I prefer it slightly faster, like on the Eno demos, but the melodic lead guitar line is present in this album version, and that's the song's strongest asset. Of all the texts I've read for this episode, none were willing to acknowledge that Tom and Patty share a voice. She clearly favored Jim Morrison and had her Jersey accent. Tom sounds more like a campy Mick Jagger. But they peacock the same way. The same inflections, the vibrato, the nasally affect. The similarities are especially apparent on Venus. If See No Evil is the I Want song, then Venus is stepping out into the big wide world for the first time and feeling raw as you stumble. The world's so thin between my bones and skin. When you're young, you feel like you're on an island. No one has ever been where you are, and no one has ever felt the way you do. Until you meet someone who feels all the same things you do. There stood another person who was a little surprised to be face to face with a world so alive. It's a fucking revelation. The call and response is so much fun. I can't help but picture the T-Birds. Huh? Why not? The punchline of the song, Tom's sense of humor. I fell into the arms of Venus de Milo. When I read that, I went, huh. I might be mixing up Venuses here, but doesn't Venus de Milo notably not have arms? Sure enough! This is one of the downsides of growing up. When you fall, there's no one else to catch you. you have to catch yourself. And sometimes when you fall in love, there are no arms to catch you, and you fall flat on your face. This is the first time on the record I'm really appreciating Fred's bass playing. He pops up between the slots between Tom and Lloyd's guitars. We hear some great keyboards too. Friction is the most obvious point of television's 60s lineage. My alarm bells were going off all over the place. The core riff was lifted from the blues. Again, it's a little Stonesy. And I see exactly what Tom carried over from Goat's Head Soup specifically. At that time, the Exile on Main Street hangover, the guys were playing with some more open song structures. Not a jam band by any means, but they were kind of... Goat's Head Soup is spaghetti squash songs. It is mush, but you can make something out of it. Television didn't do the flashy key changes or the overt virtuoso noodling side of the 60s. Tom and Richard do go there in their extended solos. Tom uses some of their vocabulary and his frizzy trips down the fretboard, but they're not being flashy about it, like the guys in their satin shirts, you know? This is how 60s garage bands moved their absolute bulldozers of singles. Television song structures are opened but constructed around the one riff. Friction seems to tip its hat to Psychotic Reaction's famous "And I feel like this," with Tom's little I hear phased, hazy accents. Again, we're kind of burying the 60s influence, but it is there. The lyrics are in the vein of the Neon Boys songs, with such astute philosophical titles as Love Comes in Spurts. Friction is a song about being horny. Diction. A snake shedding its skin. What is young if not being weird and horny and clumsily going about it? There are little jokes stitched into the music too. A mechanical sound effect after "My eyes are like telescopes." Tom sings at his grown age, "Well, I don't want to grow up. There's too much contradiction." Again, what is punk if not longing to return to adolescence? The time before you had responsibilities. Here we come upon my qualm with Marquee Moon. The sequencing. See No Evil and Venus make sense back to back, right? You have an energetic exposition followed by, slowing it down a little bit but carrying through the attitude. Why is the title track closing side 1? This is a 10-minute song, people. This is a grand finale. Even second to last, like Land of a Thousand Dances on Horses. Instead, we have it at the end of side 1, following Friction, which would have been a great side 1 closer. Even Torn Curtain could have slotted in there. I don't know. I love talking alternate sequencing though. Shock! Iconoclasm! I know. Like this marked the schism between Verlaine and Hell, the title track is really where television divert from punk in sound. Could you imagine a 10-minute Ramones song? No! A 10-minute Patti Smith song, now that makes sense. These groups are alike in the sense that yes, their singers clearly borrow from each other, and that they were way more open to opening their song structures and seeing where things could go. The solo at 3 minutes on the title track, for example, it reminds me of a line Stephen Stills might have played on Bluebird, especially that extended raga version. This is a wonderful, bordering on legendary guitar song at this point. I feel we need like 5 more years to get to legend status with this one. It's built around the 2-note trill and Fred's 2-note bass line. But don't count out the piano in there. Like there's always an ugly element in a Taking Tiger Mountain song, there's always a glossy, pretty element to a television song. What is the Marquee Moon? If we're speaking in literal terms, probably the blue moon sign. It's the only moonlight you get in a light-polluted city. Forget about the stars, where adventurers of the past use constellations to navigate. These young conquerors use street signs. Tom would never really say what his songs were about, Marquee Moon included. He specified this one was oral cinema. The music tells the story, points of tension and release, the several minutes long triple stomp ramping up that the whole band plays on, and that beautiful break at 8 minutes and 47 seconds. Forgive me for using a buzzword, but it really is ethereal. Look at the lyrics, and it's something of a movie too. Our main character is lured out into that dark, ominous night where he encounters a man at the train tracks, the Crossroads, who gives him sage advice. Don't you be so happy, and for heaven's sake, don't you be so sad. Be wise, count your blessings, walk the middle path. As a very wise horseman once said, balance on the biggest wave and race towards an early grave. He's picked up by a car full of no-gooders, dumped at a graveyard. Marquee Moon is loosely about facing your own mortality. Life in the hive puckered up my night. A kiss of death, the embrace of life. There I stand, neath the Marquee Moon. I ain't waitin'. It's interesting to note that this is where the original version of the song fades out. The extended version, the one I got to listen to, potentially saves our narrator's life. Because at the very end, we get a repeat of the first verse. And the gentle, twinkling finale is such a nod to the Doors. Elevation is affected by its poor placement in the sequencing too. This is not a side 2 opener. That's so clearly prove it. This isn't Tom's strongest songwriting either. He doesn't ever really deal a line that cuts, like stand 'neath the Marquee Moon, I ain't waitin'. There's no gems like that on this song, but I will say the lead guitar after the hook is super catchy. That part is great, and Elevation is a strong showing for Billy on drums, especially the final verse. Guiding Light was one of the newer songs on Television's set list, along with See No Evil. Where every Television song has at least one pretty element to offset Tom's sometimes whiny voice, this song is just gorgeous the whole way through. Delicate drumming, lots of focus on the cymbals, deliberate piano chords, keys, bass with lots of space between the notes, and that gentle, rocking, chiming guitar. It gets a slight rock and roll edge with the rhythm strokes like a rocker ballad. It's a gorgeous moment for that dubbing that Andy Johns talked the guys into. I know people are divided on Television's down-tempo songs, but considering my favorite Television song is Carried Away, you probably know where I stand on this issue. The lyric is credited to both guitarists. The narrator questions his place in the world. Do I belong to the night? He's lost his love. Darling, darling, do we part like the seas, the roaring shells? If I had a nickel for every time a conch was mentioned this season, I'd have 2 nickels. Lloyd's showing is simple, but his solo tears right into the song. It's wistful and anthemic. Listening to Marquee Moon makes Is This It a lot less exciting, which is a bummer. And I know this is silly, but Is This It has affected my enjoyment of Marquee Moon at times. Prove It is another song The Strokes absolutely ripped off. This is the more enjoyable of the 2 Strokes Blueprint songs on this record for Tom's attitude. He cries, "Prove it!" sneers, "Just the facts!" and mutters, "The confidential." You know, Tom gets cred for his innovations on the Jazz Master. This is one of my favorite solos of his, but he doesn't get due credit for being a performer. He adopts different voices and constantly moves in and out of talk sing to play different characters. I also like this song's almost reggae feel, like Patty did almost reggae on Redondo Beach. The drum fill kicking off Torn Curtain is just the drum fill at the beginning of Dirt. Billy, You Are Not Slick. I don't love it as a closer, but I do like the hammed up melodrama. Torn Curtain reveals another play. Torn Curtain, such an expose. It connects Television to the cabaret lineage of the Lower East Side, that stage element. The piano and the rest of the stately arrangement doesn't feel serious, it feels like a parody. Cries of tears, tears, or like the actor dramatically dabbing his face with the hanky. You can't help but chuckle. It's an interesting ending to an album that started so strong. You can't argue with side one of this thing. To recap, the punk that we think of, the rough and ready sound, it did not come from Television. None of the CBGB's bands sounded alike. Television were in a unique position. By turning down so many record deals, it gave them more time than their peers to iron out a sound. This is a tight ensemble. They are very well rehearsed. It shows in their compositions, counterpoints, and these odd melodies that twin guitars could play off of and create really exciting things. Tom clearly loved the 13th Floor Elevators and the Stones. You hear that all over the place on Marquee Moon. I keep reading critics that try to bend Tom's lead guitar lines into his appreciation of Coltrane and Albert Ayler. These people are lying to you. They sound nothing like free jazz. And Richard Lloyd loved Jeff Beck. Fred is a firmly grounded bassist. Billy only plays strictly what serves the song. Television could improvise and extend, but they were no nonsense. Andy Johns did a great job making a classic recording for Television. You could make a Marquee Moon sound alike yesterday. This is a truly forward-thinking body of material while still referencing the musical past freely and comfortably. That's the kind of record I like. Listening to Marquee Moon in 2026 is an interesting landscape to navigate. This sound was so commodified in the 2000s. The super clean, tight, bright guitars, the punchy drums, the lyrics sang with attitude, and a lead singer who was a little whiny. Hell, even the clothes. How familiar I am with this vocabulary from growing up in the 2000s does slightly affect my enjoyment of Marquee Moon. I disagree with Chris Dolan for Pitchfork, though. He likened it to something, quote, on a classic rock station wedged between Steve Miller and Skynyrd. It's not that played out yet. Though I have problems with how the package was assembled. I love every individual song on here, and I 100% appreciate what this did for indie rock. Listening to Marquee Moon is like watching a classic film and finding it tropey, then having to step back and remind yourself, no, this isn't tropey. Marquee Moon is where the trope came from. My personal favorites off this one, it was really hard to choose because literally every single one of these songs has cropped up in at least one of my playlists in the past. Sudden Death Round, See No Evil, Venus, Friction, title track, Guiding Light, Prove It. Remember, if you want to hear all of my favorites from all the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that is it! That's Marquee Moon. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Television? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, a new episode of my podcast, The Dolls Pod, every other Friday at noon, and if you so choose, you can become a member of the freaking Peanut Gallery, my Patreon, and get early access to uncensored episodes. It gives a little extra support to what I do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!